Okay, so let's look at the second of the three criteria that's used to mark your final presentations, and that is criteria 7, which is really about the way that you've been imaginative and some of the decisions you've made to create visual communications, your two final visual communications. Now, again, we'll pull up the rubric. You'll see the description on the left, which is productions of two final visual communication presentations that demonstrate imagination and thoughtful decisions. So really the keywords are imagination and thoughtful. So really this is about your creativity and your uniqueness, your originality. And again, we've got our very low to very high, and it's marked out of 10. And we're going to look in more detail at the very high descriptors and just see if we can deconstruct them a bit for you. So the first one is your highly imaginative, innovative and expressive use of materials, methods, media to produce two final presentations that meet the client's communication needs. And the second one is really about your highly considered selection and application of design elements and design principles to convey clear communication messages for the targeted audiences. Now, it's really important that both final presentations reveal the same degree of creativity and thoughtful and imaginative approach, so that one of the weaker pieces doesn't bring down your overall result. Now, what I thought we'd do is we'll look again at Mimi's work, as we did with the last presentation, and we'll look in more detail about the way she's shown imagination and thoughtful decisions. So just getting it set up here. So Mimi thoughtfully chose material and media which would create a very good professional printed result for the poster. So for that she's chosen heavy stock matte paper, or it's almost like a card. The method, there's the media, which was ink and dye, and the material was appropriate. The heavier the matte paper and more professional the paper, then the better that the media, which in this case was ink and dye, is going to sit on that paper. So what's going to happen is that the colours are going to be nice and rich, the printed ink and dye colours, and they're going to be very vibrant and just sit nicely on that paper. The method of colour photography of these original photos here of the figures, which represent the target audience, suited the theme. Now the collage technique or paper engineering, torn paper here, of the larger figure folded and torn as that new figure emerges from it, shows a pretty highly original and inventive idea, I think. And really the method chosen was most appropriate to convey this message and idea. You know, you could think about other alternatives she could have used. She could have just done one flat image rather than having this torn paper image. But, you know, she obviously decided that this looked more effective. And the nice thing about this is you can actually see the shadows that are created from the lifted up paper in the foreground. So what do you think? Did you think that she chose appropriate methods, media and materials to produce her final piece? And hopefully this will inform your own decision making as you produce your two final presentations. Now the next thing we're going to look at is the way that Mimi has chosen the design elements and design principles. And if you remember back to your design process, you actually needed to show your use of design elements and design principles. And in your design development, you needed to experiment with a whole lot of them so that you were being really thorough and that the best ones came through. So from her research, Mimi identified that blue and green were common hues used in health and fitness advertising. Perhaps the blue represents calmness, serenity, freedom, the outdoors. White could have been chosen for its symbolic representation of purity, perhaps clouds, perhaps dreaming. Let's look at the typography. She's chosen a sans serif, lowercase, for the join our section, and then she's chosen the uppercase italicized for the yoga classes. Now this typeface is sort of, I think I mentioned before, it's got a kind of a rounded edge, almost like bubble writing. Perhaps this reinforces the clouds and freedom. So again, that idea is being reinforced by the choice of the typeface. The other element that's really evident here is the form, and that's really shown in the figure elements of the boy, the young man I should say, and the young woman. It's also shown in the form of these larger figures here, from which the two healthy, fit yoga figures emerge from. Whoops, I've gone too far there. The other element here really is tone. And you can see the black and white tone of the larger figures, which create the contrast of the colour tone of the healthy figures in their yoga poses. And finally, texture has been created by the folded paper of the black and white with the larger figures, which really emphasises their being crumbled and left behind as the new smooth textured versions emerge. So they're the kind of key elements that have been employed. Look, there are certainly going to be other elements, but when we talk about design elements, we try to think about the obvious ones and the main ones that have been used to actually communicate a message or an idea. And the idea here is new figures, new yoga poses coming out of the old sluggish figure. So that's the idea really that Mimi's tried to convey. So let's talk now about the design principles. Contrast is a design principle, and really there's contrast in a lot of different ways. It occurs between the textured pattern here and the plain or no pattern of the figures, or no texture. There's pattern obviously that's been created by the way that Mimi has folded the figure. It's sort of a geometric style pattern. Scale is used to place emphasis and hierarchy on the actual type at the top. So the word yoga class is bigger. It's probably twice as big as the word join our. So really the emphasis is on yoga classes as the main point of interest. There's also a lot of balance in this poster, mostly symmetrical balance, particularly in the poster on the left, because if you were to draw a vertical line splitting the page in half, then what's on the left matches what's on the right for the most part. So, again, using this type of balance can actually reinforce the message of balance, when you're actually creating your yoga poses and how balanced you are inside. There is a bit of asymmetry here in this particular figure, but overall the poster is symmetrical. The asymmetry here is still balanced because we've got an arm down here on the left and the arm up there on the right of the vertical axis, and that actually points back up to the yoga classes. So there's good evidence there of balance, and it is an appropriate principle because it does link back to the message being conveyed. Figure ground is also employed here, and it's also been used really effectively to help emphasise that message. The plain blue background, again, which might create the feeling of the sky. Really, because it's not patterned or there's nothing going on in the background, it really just forces our attention onto this sort of highly detailed image in the foreground, which is the figure. So that's it. That's criteria 7 in a nutshell. Remember again, criteria 7 is all about how you've used methods, media, and materials, and your design elements and your design principles to create visual presentations that demonstrate imagination and thoughtful decisions.